Hello everyone, I'm talking today about issues in the strategic development of musical inclusion in England, focusing on children and young people, and talking particularly about my own work working with the 122 music education hubs across England. Inclusion in a global context really stems from the Salamanca Statement of 1994, which says that every child has a fundamental right to education, every child has unique characteristics, interests, abilities and learning needs, and that human differences are normal and learning must be adapted to the needs of the child. In an English context, there's quite a complex landscape in terms of music provision and range of providers. There's schools and music services in the formal sector, a large funder of youth music and many community music organisations in the non-formal. That includes orchestral outreach. We have a national plan for music education that's quite inclusive. It demands equality of opportunity for all pupils, regardless of race, gender, where they live, their levels of musical talent, the parental income, whether they have special educational needs or disabilities, or whether they're looked after children. The National Foundation for Youth Music is the biggest funder. It was formed in 1999. Its funding criteria revolves around increasing access, using multiple genres of music and creative work, and it gives out about £10 million per annum to projects involving children in challenging circumstances. There's 122 music education hubs in the country. They were formed to deliver the national plan. They receive roughly £82 million per annum to do that, but they've had little previous experience of delivering inclusive practice. They are now moving more towards inclusion. My work with music hubs involves working with the hubs to develop inclusion strategies that include 4-year action plans for inclusion. So far, I've been working with 34 hubs of the 122, with perhaps another 30 adopting similar processes with other people. The hubs have moved more towards inclusion for a number of reasons. Sometimes this is legacy projects from retiring CEOs. Sometimes there's a generational change in the management with different values from the change. Sometimes it's about the quality of the work, some pressure from the government, and some influence from the funders themselves. When working on inclusion strategies, the hubs need to answer 3 questions. What does musical inclusion mean in this hub? What are the challenges to full musical inclusion in this hub? And what are the strategic priorities for musical inclusion in this geographical area? Hubs that have committed to that go from Cornwall in the southwest up to various Yorkshire hubs such as Wakefield and Kirklees, Birmingham, Leeds, 2 of the biggest cities in the country, Norfolk, very rural counties, and 7 London-based hubs. So a real spread there of who's involved. Reasons for doing an inclusive strategy include embedding inclusion across the organisation, identifying priorities and challenges for inclusion, establishing a long-term sustainable offer, and balancing initiatives across different groups of children in challenging circumstances. Other purposes include constructing this 4-year action plan, having an authoritative externally sourced document for funders and for people in municipalities, identifying new funding pathways, and sharing findings across hubs. The process includes research around demographics and deprivation in the area, interviews with the senior management team, inclusion specialists and other stakeholders in inclusion, and an agreement working to agree strategic priorities and to agree the action plan. I use 2 lenses. One is youth music's HAIRD acronym around inclusion. H for holistic, E for equitable, A for authentic, R for representative, and D for diverse, that meaning diverse genres in that case. So that's worth looking up. The second lens is my own categorization of children in challenging circumstances. Firstly, those with a permanent life condition, then those with geographical challenges, those with temporary life challenges, those with identity that relates to inequalities, and those with behavioural challenges. Some challenges for the hubs have included capacity, the perception of the hub and the perception of music from schools, etc. They may not have an appropriate workforce. They might have a lack of awareness of their internal exclusionary factors, and the children might suffer from cultural isolation. Some ways forward. Data can drive inclusion. Having a more representative workforce with appropriate skills for inclusion, developing progression routes for all children, embracing music technology, and embracing genres like grime and other hip-hop related genres. Some initial outcomes from the work have been that inclusion training is now widespread. There's a proliferation of inclusive ensembles. There's more work done with young people with challenging behaviour across the country, and there is more targeted work being done in some hubs. Questions for hubs. Can classical music be inclusive, and if so, how? What is your true organisational purpose? Do you deliver grime or other hip-hop related genres? And how much of your grant actually goes into inclusion and is ring-fenced for inclusion? Questions for community musicians and organisations. How would you resolve the tension between working with the most young people and working with the most vulnerable young people? What's quality in inclusive practice? What are inclusive pedagogies? And which groups do we not need paid structured reflection?